All right. So I'm going to try something a little bit interesting today. I have some thoughts on politics, including the election that's just around the corner. And part of my perspective on this is going to be shaped by the fact that I've been participating. I live in Utah, and we have what's called a caucus convention system with the Utah Republican Party. And if you're not familiar with caucus, neither was I really at the time. I have a much longer kind of intro to Caucus and what's so great about it uh, that I can do in another video. Um, but today, like, we just had a special election in our congressional district because the our congressman who is currently serving in the Utah State Senate is running for United States Congress. And, if he wins his race, then his position will be open. So we just held a little mini election to uh, vote for a candidate to replace him. So what was really cool, I'm going to go ahead and share a photo that I took from there, which was really cool. Um, get this open. All right. So right here, there we go. Super. So this was kind of my view, and admittedly, this is actually a little bit closer up. But what you can't see here, there are all these candidates here for the office, but there are also several hundred delegates seated right here on the bleachers with me. And what's really neat about this whole thing is you actually get to go and do politics in person. And it's a lot more exciting this way, to be very frank with you. It's a lot more exciting. It's a lot more engaging. It's a lot more personal. And even though like it's still totally possible for people to say mean things to each other and stuff and not really listen to each other and be talking past each other in any setting, it's still the case that like here it's just so much more it's much more civilized. You can actually hold a real conversation with somebody as opposed to the way we as Americans are, for the most part, accustomed to doing our elections, where you basically just show up and you drop a ballot in a box, or worse, you just mail it, and then you spend like all of your time, just watching these grotesque, political exposés on your favorite mainstream news media outlet or alternative, whatever those words even mean anymore. Um, and then you take to social media and you just blast, and you're just like, oh, yeah, I don't know how you could possibly belong to the other party. How could you possibly blah blah blah? And you just end up having a lot of people really talking past each other in these really extreme sorts of ways. And again, it's not like that can't happen in this setting, but like, let's be fair and honest. Like, if you're standing side by side with your fellow voters and you have some kind of a disagreement, it's a lot more natural when you're just there in person to be like, hey, why did you vote that way? What do you think? And it's like, it's just so much more respectful, and you can have a dialogue there. And while, i- in some sense, any system of people and of politics isn't really and can't really be any better than the people who participate in it. And this is, not perfect. I would still like to just point everybody to how successful these events are. Um, because here we have delegates. I'm a delegate. I was elected by my neighbors to represent them in these kinds of elections. And there's something really powerful about that. And I'll just try to state it briefly here to get the idea across, and you can mull over it and gain your own experiences with it as you will. That's crucial for you to gain your own experiences with these things. Otherwise, I'm just going to be, I don't know, talking to a wall here. But you have to get involved at this level. Um, Otherwise, politics is just going to be forever frustrating and never really make any sense to you. Um, I'm sorry, but that's how I feel about it. Like, you can think you're learning things by watching, politicians, TV campaign ads and watching debates and stuff. But until you can actually sit down and have a civilized dialogue with other people and be called upon to represent others and vote for people to represent you more directly at the local level, until you do that, like it's all just fiction. It's all theory. And I really do want to get more into like what makes this system so great. But like at its core, I could state this in so many different ways. But one of them is like you're voting for people you actually know. And this really stands in stark contrast to the presidential election, where it's just like, hey, there are these two people that I've never met and I never will. And I'm 100% confident that they feel totally unaccountable to me. And so there's a lot of like nihilism that goes into that. There's a lot of like defeatism. It's like, but yeah, how could I possibly make a difference? How could I possibly, I'm just a tiny drop in the bucket. How could I possibly sway, you know, their 100 million other voters? What could I possibly do or say that's going to, tip the balance in any meaningful way? So I just love this because at this neighborhood and county level, you can actually see that you are making a difference. You can actually help to change minds. You can share ideas. And I had several people, candidates included at the this event, tell me, "Oh, that's interesting. I'd never heard about that before." And the dialogue is ongoing. The conversation is still open because these candidates know that they rely on the delegates to get elected, which means they have to keep that communication open, which is great. Um, it's my belief that a candidate who is elected by delegates is just stands so much better of a chance to even know what he's doing when he gets into office than one who's just nominated and elected by popular vote. Because yeah, I've talked with a lot latter kind of candidate as well. They exist in Utah also, the kind who just totally don't care for grassroots support. I mean, they care about it because it turns into numbers, and so they'll put on a nice face for these things, for these kinds of events, and so on. Well, if they even show up, um, other than when it's absolutely required. But at the end of the day, you're totally expendable to them. You're just a statistic, and they can just spend their way to replacing you with you know people who just uh, do a Google search to try to figure out how they should vote. And so this is like a huge red flag for you to know, like even if you don't have experience doing things this way because very few people do. This is more of what a republic looks like right here. Is when you're right there and you can get up to the front and you can raise an issue to these candidates. And I did that today. Um, I had a question or an issue on the method we were using to vote. And so it's just so much more effective when you can meet in person and have this dialogue, as opposed to just being total nobodies, total strangers who don't even know each other. And but yeah, like I said, there are candidates who can also just totally spend you out of existence, basically, as far as their balloting and all that is concerned. And that's very disconcerting when we've arrived at that place. And so I was going to say one clue as to the differences between a republic and a democracy and how to know that you're being cheated politically is when you get a ballot and you don't even know who these people are and you have no realistic means of finding out who they are before the election deadline. Um, and I don't want to be critical here or anything like that, but I think many people really do. It's just a fact of life. You get this ballot in the mail and you're like, okay, do I vote to retain these judges? Um, you know, you have no experience with them. I've had an experience with a judge within a little over a year ago, and my retention vote on that judge is a hard no now after having that experience, and probably actually for most of our local judges here. Um, Probably all of them. Anyways, so that's just kind of lay of the land. There are huge differences between just being able to participate in person, talk with real people, have these real conversations, and actually have them go somewhere. Because I'll say this, even like there's a difference even between having a conversation with a coworker or a buddy or something like that who agrees with you or who disagrees with you, whatever, and being able to be civilized enough to have a dialogue there, that's huge. That's important. That's helpful. But this is actually being in uh in the trenches of the process itself. Because it's one thing when you're just having this hypothetical or philosophical conversation or debate with someone, and then there's no real application for it other than just like, yeah, I'm probably just going to go ahead and go vote the same way I already was going to vote or whatever on election night. Versus like, hey, you are the policymakers, right? You are the electors who will select our policymakers, right? Those are two very, very different roles, and it's one thing to have an opinion and even to be able to convey and articulate your position on things in with civility. Um, that's hugely important, but it's another thing entirely, even on top of that, to be trusted. And this is why I think it's so important that people actually do participate in their neighborhood, their precinct caucus on caucus night when we have it, for the states to do it. It's a vanishingly small handful of states, by the way, that even do this. I can probably show a map or link to it here for that for those interested. But Utah is one of those exceptionally rare states that even has a caucus system anymore, where you can just go ahead and get involved directly. And it was in the course of I wanted to comment and make sure that this is actually geared towards and is particularly relevant to the presidential election that's going on right now, because this opens up a conversation that we really should be having, that does touch on candidates, but it goes way beyond candidates. Um, and that is just one of the things that really stood out to me after I had first gotten involved in the caucus system. So the first presidency, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, of which I'm a member, they sent out this letter that was read over the pulpit in our sacrament meeting on Sunday, and they said, "Get out and if you're in Utah, get out and go get involved in this caucus process. This is a very special thing, and we want you to get involved. We want you to go and uh, make your voice heard, and participation in this system, which is vital to our republic, has been like really low." And so I'm like, oh, wow, I heard this when I fairly recently moved to Utah full time. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I had better jump into this thing and get politically involved because, anyways, I was starting to have some decent stability in my life and moving in one place instead of, sorry, living in one place instead of moving all around. I was like, okay, I need to be more engaged here. So that was one of the first things I did. And I'm really, really glad that I did, because I've actually learned through this process of participating in the caucus and convention system here in Utah, like what are the differences between a democracy and a republic? And they're huge. They're vast. They're like innumerable in terms of their scope and their impact. I just can't stress this enough. And like people who have just had like the high school education and stuff, or even college degree or whatever, and they can talk all the talking points about like, oh, I know the differences between a democracy and a republic. Like unless you've actually lived it, unless you've actually had these experiences with it, like I just don't put a lot of stock in the ability to tell the difference, unless and until you've actually like experienced the difference. It's enormous. Um, and again, it doesn't mean that the policies that come out of this process are perfect. It doesn't mean that the people who participate are perfect, but the process is, it's honestly inspired. It's so much better than what you could get otherwise. And so as I'm doing this, I'm like, okay, so there's our precinct caucus, which is like it's just your neighbors, and you show up in like a school, like gym or classroom or something like that, and you have these folding chairs, and you set them up, and you credential, which means you have a list of people, and you say, oh, are you who you say you are, and they provide you with the photo ID or whatever, and it's like, but it's super easy because you can actually verify because these are my neighbors. Like, oh, I know you, yeah, okay, yep, I recognize you. Oh, I know your name even, right? And it's really cool. We sat down, we voted for people that we actually knew, or that we, if we didn't know them yet, we could just person to person ask them questions. Hey, what makes you think you're qualified to represent us? Super cool, super cool. I would not trade it for anything, because this system actually works. And so yeah, I jumped in, I put my hat in the ring, and I've been doing this for multiple times now, multiple years of being a delegate. And yeah, it's just so cool. You can vote for somebody you actually know and trust to represent you. And I'll just say this kind of briefly. Very happy to go more into this in a future video, but like one of the key differences here between a republic and a democracy right off the bat is just uh, not only are you voting for someone that you actually know as opposed to someone you don't know, so your information is maximized as opposed to minimized, right? So under democracy, the information you have, the informedness of yourself as a voter is minimized. And so again, like that's a red flag. You're voting for these people you don't even know, voting on questions you don't understand. That's a huge red flag, and they leverage that to no end because an uninformed or ignorant person's vote is counted exactly the same as a person who's put in thousands of hours of research and is really good. But like one of the great outcomes, by the way, of a republic is you actually get to leverage the ingenuity, the wisdom, the intellect, the expertise, and the virtues of people who have put in the effort to become better at these things. Um, and so one way I've thought of to kind of visualize it is with a democracy, you're just getting kind of an average of people's opinions on things. Whatever the average says, that's what you do. And let's be honest, the average person is not particularly enlightened in matters of public policy um, or virtue anymore, for that matter, seeing how our society's become. But in a republic, you can actually you can actually elect the people who are the best and the brightest, and the people who are, uh, have the most integrity to represent you. And that's how it's supposed to work. And when you have people who aren't that bright or who don't have integrity representing you, um, that's that's the breakdown of the republic. That's you have some pretty good indications by that point, by those evidences, that the republic has transformed into something more democracy or mobocracy like. Because you have these people who are now pandering to what the masses want, or subscribing to relativism, just doing whatever the heck they want, as basically as though they're you know autonomous overlords and we're just near serfs that they're just controlling, right? So yeah, this is really cool. You get to talk with each other, and I'm pretty sure, as I'm speaking about this, by the way, that there are like at least three or four people who I'm hoping this is true, that come to your mind as like, oh wow, yeah, I know this guy in my ward, his brother so and so is very articulate, very reasonable. I agree with him a lot. Or somebody in your neighborhood, whatever. Like there should be someone in your life that you actually look up to and that you trust to make certain decisions more than you would trust yourself to do. And that's key because as you vote for delegates to represent you who have above average sensibility, the outcomes of that process are going to be above average. It's not just going to be the raw average or majority rules like in a democracy. Instead, it's going to be, yeah, we agree that we don't fully know what we're doing, but we do know this guy well enough, and I trust him to represent us. And we each know people who are like this. We each know people who are seasoned, who are experts, who are veterans, I guess, and have greater intelligence than we do on some things. And we need the ability to express that. We need the ability to place our confidence in greater intelligence as opposed to only subscribing to the pattern of average intelligence. And I know there are tons of proponents of the democratic system who are going to be super wildly offended by this, by me insulting them and saying that there is such a thing as average intelligence. And if you go for a popular vote, then that's probably the best you're going to get is just average intelligence. And it's really not suitable. It's really not good enough because let's face it, most of us don't specialize in this. It's I don't know. Can you imagine conducting open heart surgery by a consensus vote by people who don't even specialize in that? And I'm not saying this to say that, by the way, that we need to go and elect career politicians. I'm not saying that at all. Because there are people who make a living out of exploiting the gullibility of people and manipulating them and so on. But we shouldn't stand for that. Like, and the only reason, by the way, that they're able to get in power and stay in power is when people aren't informed about the people they're voting for, and they're not that close, and they don't have that good discernment or whatever. And don't get me wrong, anybody can be duped, and any mortal can, change his colors over time. You could have voted for a person, elected a person who is, perfectly moral and upright at the time. Love to find one of those candidates, right? Um, but hypothetically, right, you could vote for somebody who's actually a great person, and then that person can actually turn sour, and that's a thing, and we need recourse there too. But anyway, just speaking to the averages and the probabilities and the likelihoods here, the likelihood of you getting a candidate that is actually moral and upright, decent and honest, when you vote for the people who you know are, you know, upright and intelligent and moral and decent and honest, like if you are voting for that and if you have sufficient discernment, you have sufficient proximity to be able to judge that, then like they also get that opportunity too, by the way. And you're going to get it. You're going to get, if you vote for above average intelligence, you're going to get above average intelligence in your results. You vote for exceptional people, you're going to get exceptional results, right? Um, so this is just part of the difference, right, between this vast chasm between democracy, or what I like to call mobocracy, and a republic. And yeah, if you haven't experienced this, go into it in person. And no, it doesn't come down to the posters and the campaign slogans and the rah rah rah. I actually kind of hate that. The idea came into my head today, like just don't clap, just think things through, be level headed, and express your support or lack of support for people in the way you vote. You don't have to be. This doesn't have to be a pep rally, and I know we can kind of get that way when we're there in person and we somebody else says something we agree with and we want to cheer. You can disagree with me on that. That's fine. That idea just popped into my head and I kind of like it. Anyway, so yeah, we've got this huge difference here, but like so the members of a neighborhood will go and elect a set of delegates to go and represent them in the nominating convention. There are a number of different ways you could, in theory, do a convention in a republic, um, to vote for your candidates. In the system we're doing right now, which is not optimal, it's partisan, and you nominate a candidate who then goes on to the primary, um, and then whoever wins the primary for your party goes on to the general election ballot. And okay, so like this is one of the things that super weirded me out that I was just noticed all the more clearly after starting to do this is I was like, well, wait a minute. I voted for people to represent me on caucus night, so I went ahead and did that. I voted then, and then as an elected delegate, I voted again at convention to decide on which candidates we should have on our ballot. And then there was this primary that's like the public goes and votes on these candidates for themselves. And then we have a general election where the public votes again to decide which of the partisan candidates they want to win. And I'm just like, wait a minute, why are we voting like three or four times in for one election? This makes no sense. And not to be self-congratulatory, but indeed, that makes no sense. That makes no sense. Like whoever's listening to this, like think this through. Why would you need to vote three or four different times? Or if you have completely ignored the caucus convention system or it doesn't exist in your state and all you have is like a primary, why are you voting twice for your candidates? And there are people who will say, oh, uh, we've just always done it that way, and therefore it has to be right. This is one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest plagues of politics, including in the Republican Party, is this mindset that, oh, we've just always done it this way, and therefore you can't question it because it's got to be right. We've just always done it this way, and therefore it works, right? And I'm like, you know, just indulge me here. Seeing the two people who are on the presidential ballot right now, like, oh, it works. Yep, that's our proof that it works. There you go. There you have it. There is your proof that our political system works as intended, as designed by someone, and by an absolute lunatic, by somebody who's a sociopath, frankly. Um, so we need to question these things. And so by questioning that, I learned, for example, that the primary system is not original. Like primaries, one, they're not mentioned in the Constitution. They're completely unoriginal and foreign to the founding fathers of the United States. What are they? How did they get there? They're a partisan tool, and they leverage a popular vote mechanism. I can go way more into depth on this. If you are a resident of Utah and you're aware of like the political shenanigans going on here, we have what's referred to as SB 54, Senate Bill 54, from several years ago, was used to create this signature gathering path for people to bypass the caucus convention and just put themselves directly onto the primary ballot that way. And there's also, of course, the national popular vote movement that says, hey, we want to just have presidents and stuff nominated by or elected, sorry, by just a nationwide popular vote. And I hate to break it to you, but we are actually already most of the way there. The reason why the signature gathering bill and why national popular vote are so uh they're 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 late stage symptoms of an already very advanced cancer, right? That's the way I would characterize them. And people attack them as though they're the like only problem or the primary problem. And it's true that we should at least wake up to the fact that those are there. But like, if you think about it, this signature gathering route that bypasses that subverts and replaces the republic and just swaps it out for for a democracy, for a lunatic democracy, uh, that's that's intentional. It's by design. But like, uh, that wouldn't exist. That wouldn't even be a problem. It wouldn't be a threat if the primaries weren't a thing. So I had to go into the history behind this, and it turns out like primaries were installed by the progressive movement, like back in the 30s, and throughout this last century, uh, the progressives were trying hard to get us all to accept this thing, and now like present day conservatives are like, oh, you can't question the primary system. It's sacred. It's like part of our constitutional republic. It's like electoral college is in the Constitution somewhere or something. I'm just like, do you even know what you're talking about? Because I've searched the Constitution and it's not there. And like the electoral college system that we use today, that is also not in the Constitution. Not only is that term like doesn't exist in the Constitution, but also the way we vote for president today is extremely very different from the way that we voted for president under the Constitution and the way that it prescribes that we vote for them. And it's been amended to change that process. We don't even follow the amended process. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm getting into a big long kind of sidebar discussion that maybe people will be more interested in after the fiasco of an election we're about to have, and then maybe we'll be a little bit more hungry and penitent and ready for that conversation. Sorry, but like there's so much here to go through. But just when you start recognizing these layers of this onion, so like general elections, those were added after the fact. Um, so this idea of, oh, you just kind of have a whole bunch of people show up on this one night and then just all vote. That's not in the Constitution. That actually directly contradicts what is in the Constitution about how the president of the United States should be elected. I have not too long ago I created a website on this. It's called constitutionalvote.org, um, about what is actually in the Constitution, how it says that our presidents and vice presidents should be elected, and it is way different from the way we do things today. There's that Schoolhouse Rock video on the Electoral College, and they have this little jingle in there. It's in the Constitution. It is not in the Constitution. What we do today is completely unconstitutional, uh, null and void, frankly. So if you're concerned about like election insecurity and electoral fraud, anyways, this will probably get me censored for saying it from YouTube's algorithm, but like it's baked in. Um, Fraudulent outcomes are baked in by design to the democratic system that we're using today, which those security loopholes could not exist if we had actually stuck with the constitutional republic that the founding fathers gave us. But that didn't last more than like 15 years. We didn't keep a republic. You know, Benjamin Franklin has that quote where this woman is asking him, what did we get from this convention?" And he says, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." We didn't keep it for 15 years. It was done away in the 1804. It was through the 12th Amendment that installed this alternative voting system that guaranteed that we would have a national two-party system. The national two-party system very quickly took over. Our first president, elected president, General George Washington, he had no political party, and his farewell address, uh, after serving his 2 terms in office, he said, "You should not have parties. Parties are a cancer. Parties are a plague." Here I am right now today participating through a partisan system because I have no other realistic alternative. Millions of Americans recognize this and they're disenfranchised. They effectively don't have a vote. They don't have a voice because they're not allowed to participate in this incestuous partisan power structure here. And yeah, that's a huge part of the issue here. Is there's actually nothing in the Constitution that grants power to political parties. The parties have stolen the electoral authority from the people. Anyway, I'm giving you kind of this 50,000 foot backdrop. If there's something here that just sounds egregious or crazy to you, um, I can back it up and go into a lot more detail on it. If I misspoke at any point, I can clarify. But like, this is really important stuff for us to understand, and like almost no one understands. And one of the reasons is because like almost no one participates in this caucus convention system. And so yeah, just to be clear, this special election we participated in, it was through this caucus convention system, which is why we had such the great blessing of being able to show up in person and actually have some civilized dialogue and debate before going and voting on these candidates who were there right in the flesh in person right in front of us, you know, and we could ask them questions, we could grill them. In fact, well, the grilling time really preceded this event. They just gave some talks on this. But like we had events where we were invited to say, hey, you know, candidate so and so is at this, this high school or whatever tonight. Or we're having a meet and greet event for all the candidates, and they had multiple of these events, and we could just show up and go talk to them, ask them more questions. They had a couple of debate events, and we could just show up to those, and like you could ask a real person a real question, and you'd get a real, well, some of the time, real answer, right? Um, and they're still politicians, right? They're still incentivized to make these promises and try to appease the people who vote for them. But like, it's so much easier to tell when they're just giving you a load of fluff when you're there in person. Um, and honestly, one of the things that's my absolute favorite about the delegate system, the caucus convention system, I go to these events, the nominating conventions, the elections stuff. I go to them and to vet the candidates. To vet the candidates, sure, yeah, but also I'm there like I can just be honest about my feelings. I'm there more for the delegates than I am for the candidates because I actually get to rub shoulders with people who are exceptionally thoughtful about their politics and who have some really good, clever, innovative, just really um, great ideas. And there are some loonies like make it through. Sorry, shouldn't say that. My fellow delegates will hate me. But no, we all know this. We all know that like the fact that your neighbors elected you to represent them does not mean that it doesn't automatically mean that their discernment was great. But like I can attest, even though there are some uh, aberrations, there are some exceptions like that. They are the exception and they are not the rule, which is way different from normal politics, where like it really does seem like, wow, everyone in the opposite party is like totally, completely insane. And even like you, if you're paying very much attention, you would probably rightly question the sanity of a lot of the people who are supposedly on your same team as well. Anyways, so I'm just saying this to try to cut through some of the partisan nonsense we often run into. Stop talking past each other. Actually, do things that are productive and helpful. Um, I did want to say a few things about the presidential candidates. I think there is just I don't need to throw up a whole big long set of newsreels and footage here or anything like that, just to incriminate them. But like I think it's abundantly clear that the economics and politics of the past 4 years have been completely disastrous. You have to have reckless disregard for human life and for freedom. You have to be very contrary to the principles um, advanced by the founding fathers, frankly, to have tolerance for what's been going on in terms of the loss of life, the recklessness, the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan, the abortions that occur every day. Um, Latest figure from worldmeters.info is 73 million abortions per year, which translates to what, 200,000 per day. That's just unacceptable. It's really despicable and cruel that we have elective abortions to such an insane degree. You can't support elective abortions and be a decent human being, even though millions of people who support elective abortions masquerade as decent human beings. And so, yeah, our nation is going to get its comeuppance. There's a destruction pending here, and God's not just going to sit on the sidelines and let us, dismember innocent babies, every day, to the tune of, last century, 100 million dead from communism. That is not a made up thing. That's a very real thing. A lot of people like to pretend, oh, like you religionists, Christians, you're responsible for so many deaths. And I'm like, okay, my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is responsible for exactly zero untimely deaths. And this communism thing, like murdered, butchered, starved, you name it, 100 million plus people this last century. And now with the latest abortion figures, the lasciviousness, the pandemic, the plague of lasciviousness is killing nearly that figure in helpless babies every single year. So had to say that that's kind of big if you're talking about what actually hurts or helps human beings. That's got to be a huge one. And yeah, I don't like to be a single issue person. But if that doesn't weigh heavily in your mind, then your mind is just wrong. It's twisted, and you need to escape that evil, pleasure seeking, and just extremely inconsiderate of your fellow human beings and callous towards life attitude. You need to repent, or you will be destroyed. I'm just going to put that point blank. Like the prophets have been very clear about that. Elder Holland recently in General Conference, has actually been multiple years now ago, said, "Your houses will be left unto you desolate," repeating a scriptural warning about where this stuff leads. So, like, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And as the scriptures point out, like, what you send out will return to you again. And so, if your uh, attitude is one of desolation, if you're determined to like destroy life, then yeah, that's what's going to happen to our nation because people who become callous towards life, like, they become nihilists themselves. There's this point where like, anyways, I don't want to go into the all that right now, but people really do bring this calamity on themselves. Like, if you give up on the lives of others, especially the innocent, the spirit that is in you gives up on yourself, and that's just wretched to watch. It's wretched. It's awful. Like, if anybody's involved, no, not anybody, but whoever is involved in this stuff, I urge you to stop. I urge you to repent, as the prophets have often foretold, and stated point blank. Like, the reason why we have such crummy politics is because of personal unrighteousness, and we need to fix that. So here's praying for repentance. And yeah, I've written some pieces before on Trump. I kind of waffled on him early on because I didn't know him. I've still never met the guy. Still never had a face-to-face conversation with him. And that's one of the issues in doing our politics the way we're doing them. Uh, it's because we never get a chance to actually vet our candidates very well. Um, so yeah, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about Trump. Uh, but these are the only two realistic options, right? And if you're upset about that, then I highly urge you to go and check out my website, constitutionalvote.org, to figure out and learn how the founding fathers actually anticipated this exact problem that we're having right now, where we have two candidates on the ballot and they're both terrible. Um, and people have made, sorry, just sidebar here. People have made the argument before that Trump's politics are much better than Harris's, and I don't disagree with that. I agree with that. I don't agree with all of his policy choices, uh, but I think there is some level of common sense that's just like less hurtful. So I'm not saying go vote for Trump. Honestly, I'm like kind of tempted to just write in President Nelson. People talk about how before Biden dropped out of the race, they were talking about, oh, well, these both like really old people running for president. I don't think we can vote for somebody that old. And I'm like, I know somebody who's older. He just turned 100 years old, and we should vote for him. His name is Russell M. Nelson. Write him in on your ballot, right? So, anyways, I'm still undecided as how I'm going to vote on Tuesday because I like to wait until the last possible moment for critical decisions to gather as much information as possible before I choose. And sometimes that's paid off really well, and other times I've procrastinated too long to make the decision. Right, so it's up to you. You're responsible for your own choices, but yeah, just I was putting in a plug for the website constitutionalvote.org. Like, the founding fathers foresaw the problem of having a two-party system and of having parties in general, even, and warned us in the strongest terms against those things. And we went like right into it because I don't know, someone wasn't paying attention over time, and that's really disappointing. And yeah, it's really difficult to undo. With this whole democracy, mobocracy thing, it's really hard to put the genie back in the bottle. I have well over a dozen people crabbing at me, telling me, "Oh, you hate people, you hate democracy, you don't want people to be able to vote, you want them to be disenfranchised because I like the caucus convention system." I'm like, you don't even know what it is. You're criticizing something that you've never participated in, that you've never experienced, and you have no idea what it is, right? And that's a huge problem. So uh, it doesn't disenfranchise people. In fact, your vote counts for more when you go and vote in your neighborhood caucus than it does when you vote in a primary or on a general election ballot. It just counts for more. Not only because, number one, it does have more of an influence on who ultimately ends up getting elected. It does. It has more influence on that. But also, your informedness increases by virtue of participation in the caucus convention process, which there's no substitute for that. I don't care who you listen to on YouTube or whatever great insights you get from some pundit. We can't boil everything down to like this handful of remote pundits that we just like parrot because we follow them on Rumble or something like that. That can't be how we do our politics ultimately. And unfortunately, most of the public is seemingly left without any other choice because of how terrible our voting systems have become. Anyways, I've said some of my piece for today. I just wanted to talk up as I have just had this renewed experience about how great and wonderful it is to meet in person with real people and have great conversations versus this, hey, let me go and, ask my favorite athlete on TikTok what she thinks and just pencil that in. It's such a stupid way to vote. It's such an uninformed, it's such an ignorant way to vote to basically make media influencers and celebrities be your. I know not everybody does that, but like, let's admit it. No matter how vast the internet is, it has always been and always will be slim pickings as far as the information you can actually obtain about a candidate before you go and vote for them. And it always will be that way as long as you are stuck with a democratic system like the primaries and general elections that we have today. And so, if you want something better, I urge you to seriously investigate the caucus convention system. If you live in a state that does not have this, please urge your congressman to check it out. Like you check it out personally, and then you go make an endorsement to them and say, "Hey, we need this. Hey, you notice these problems we're having. There's a solution. Hey, this incivility. Hey, the lack of informedness." And in all likelihood, you're probably talking to somebody who is elected through the democratic system and who probably wouldn't dream of changing it. And then you're in hot water. But yeah, we're all in the same boat there in many respects. But I just wanted to say this is, in my experience, this is the last vestige of the republic that the founding fathers gave us. And if we don't protect this, if we don't preserve this, we're not getting it back. So, well, thanks, guys. I'm keeping it real here. Just I don't know what keeping it real means other than just being honest. It's unthinkable to be anything but honest, I guess. Did want to, I guess, brag and show off my I voted for Jesus pins. See one on the hat here. Let me get this one closer. I don't know, it's getting some awful glare there. But anyways, uh, love it. Anyways, hope you're doing well. Please vote wisely. Thanks.